All right. So at the outset, let me thank the organizers for this very wonderful seminar, very timely seminar, very, very pertinent seminar on the threats that we face that come to us through insidiously through our civil society. I had the pleasure of listening to Ambassador Sybil. It is always indeed education to listen to his erudition, scholarship, and his very practical views born out of long service and experience. Now, I would like at the outset to point out that the large countries like Russia, like China, like India, they are subject to forces of entropy from within. And most of the time, these large states have collapsed from internal forces rather than external aggression. For example, the Soviet Union had beaten, it was invaded by Nazi Germany. The German tanks of the Wehrmacht had reached the gates of Moscow, and then they were rolled back from Moscow back to Berlin. They could not destroy Russia militarily. But the simple fact is that in 1990-91, the Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union, collapsed without a single shot being fired. The bulk of the reason for this collapse was engineered economic collapse, but also an attack, societal attack on the institutions of the Soviet Union, on the people, on molding their shapes, shaping their attitudes, opinions, psychological, makeup, etc., to create such a massive change without a shot being fired. The ambassador very rightly spoke of all these colored revolutions that have been taking place through civil society, that have been causing regime change without firing a shot, without putting boots on the ground. And all this is being done by very effective use of the social media, psychological warfare, cyber warfare, information warfare, a whole host of toolkits to destabilize, to create problems, and to even overthrow regimes. Very, very legally elected regimes. Let's go back to the Maidan revolution in the Ukraine, where the entire problem started in 2008. You see, Yanukovych is very, legally elected government is overthrown by a Maidan coup, by just creating mobs that head to Kyiv. Mobs in Odessa that burn the Russians in there, don't let them come out. And those that come, jump out, are murdered. You create rage of such a sort. You revive, the Nazi impulses in Ukraine. And let me give you a little bit of a background to that. When Germany, Adolf Hitler had attacked the Soviet Union, he tried to create insurgencies to destabilize the target society. Reinhard Gehlen, Major General Reinhard Gehlen of the Abwehr, he contacted the Ukrainian, insurgents, the Ukrainian pro-Nazis, and he used them to carry out pogroms against Jews, against Russians. He tried to create a breakaway movement. And after the war, the OSS, Office of Strategic Studies, and subsequently the CIA, they contacted Reinhard Gehlen and the Abwehr's entire intelligence network in the Soviet Union, and they took it over. And a lot of these, Bandera, etc., go back to that era. And they were picked up and they brought center stage to, the Ukrainians and the Slavs are cousins. I mean, they are closely knit, closely related society. In fact, Ukraine was the mother of the Orthodox Russian church, the Russian Slavic culture, etc. They had so many commonalities, and today they are the bitterest of enemies. How has it happened? It has happened through civil society. It has happened through the social media. It has happened through cyber warfare, information warfare, psychological warfare operations to destabilize a society, to weaken a society, to overthrow legally elected governments. Violet Revolution, Spring Revolution, Arab Spring, etc., etc. The examples are one too many, where just by a sorry, where just by a texting revolution, messages that are texted to start a fire, to start social unrest, to like the flash mob dance you can create by texting. You can also create a flash mob of people who will burn down government buildings, who will overthrow a legally elected government. And let me tell you, this toolkit is in practice right now, even as we speak during our elections. So, a lot of states can be overthrown just by using, influencing civil society, using the media, the electronic media, the mass media, and infiltrating that through people who have been either purchased, whose loyalties have been bought over, or who are otherwise ideologically influenced to peddle agendas of foreign governments. They can be major sources of destabilization. But the most major source is social media. Its reach is tremendous. You may not watch the television. You may switch it off if you don't want to hear a particular viewpoint. But social media is so insidious. It gets to your home, it gets to your mobile, it gets to your laptop, it gets to your mainframe, whatever, and it is able to influence attitudes, opinions, outlooks, and create mayhem in that society. We as a society in India are particularly vulnerable. Diversity, which is in one way our strength, is also our major weakness. We don't have ethnic coherence, we don't have coherence of language or kind of a homogeneity which makes that society more proof to foreign penetration, etc. We have so many fault lines. And for the last, I would say, 400 years of Muslim invasions and rule from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Turkic sultans, Mughals, Mongols, have you, and then 2 centuries of British rule. The one that did the most damage to us was the British rule, because very scientifically they set about trying to identify our various fault lines. And the fault lines of creed, of caste, of language, of religion, of ethnicity, of race, everything was exploited to divide and rule this country. And to divide it in such a way that even 75 years after independence, we have not been able to bridge those fault lines created between castes. And I shall be talking of that in the evening session in far greater detail. But let me just make a brief and passing mention. Fault lines created by exploiting caste divisions, and we had Herbert, Risley, the caste commissioner of India, the census commissioner of India, who headed the Royal Anthropological Society and was a very powerful agent in trying to do social engineering in India. He created the caste fault lines, which are still the cause of almost disruption. He did a series of caste-based census, with the help of which he socially re-engineered Indian society to freeze caste fault lines forever and ever. Jati and Varna were fluid, and they were made into deep fissures and fault lines, which instead of papering over, instead of doing away with, we have deepened. We have deepened to an extent that is dangerous. And you are seeing it play out in this election again. There is talk of caste-based censuses. Herbert Hope Risley, Sir Herbert Hope Risley used that to weaken our society, make it amenable to penetration and control by foreign powers. Right? Now, once again, those narratives are being taken out to create bitter north-south divides. There was the British Bishop Caldwell who started this Dravidian Aryan nonsense. After all, when you do the genetic profiling, Indian north and south of the Vindhyas, there is no difference in the genetic makeup. They are the same people. It's just that if I go and stay in Madras, I will have a greater tan than if I stay somewhere up north. But that has been used to create such bitter divides. People are asking for secession. On the basis of that, Afro-Dalit identities are being created and built. And I totally agree with Ambassador Kanwar Sibal when he says, why the hell do we have to go and study social sciences in Harvard and other universities in the United States? We should go there only for STEM. STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths. Yes, you may have things to learn there. Why should Indian history be written in Harvard? Does Harvard write the history of Russia, France, China? No, they don't. We are the only people who have outsourced our history to Harvard. Initially, it was Oxford and Cambridge. Now it is Harvard telling us who we are. The Aryans came from outside. Hinduism is a foreign implant in India. The Vedas came from outside. The Aryans are aliens. These were colonial narratives built to justify colonial rule over India, right? And because of these narratives, they were able to rule us for 200 years. And Herbert Hope Risley had said, when he did the caste census, first caste-based census in 1872, that as long as there is caste, there will be no India. I'm sorry, our pygmy politicians have kept caste relevant and alive when it had no business to be. No business to be still kicking and alive. When a society industrializes, when a society urbanizes, what is the relevance of caste? Can I sit in a metro and ask the person sitting next to me, what is your caste? What is your this thing? If he slaps me in the face, he will be fully justified. So with industrialization, with urbanization, caste should have become irrelevant and finished, atrophied, died out, become an anachronism that it has been for hundreds of years now. But it is being kept alive. The caste cleavages are being deepened because of economic incentives, job reservations, reservations in educational institutions. Merit is being pushed out to the United States. India as a society is being destroyed from within by these termites. You see, you can destroy a society without firing a shot. Like the Soviet Union was splintered into 15 states. Those were also the first colored revolution, really. And there have been so many of these colored revolutions which have overthrown governments left, right, and center in Eastern Europe, in Middle East, etc., etc. And it is being attempted against us. Rajiv Malhotra was so very prescient when he wrote his first book on breaking India. And he warned us against these breaking India forces, institution. George Soros has put up $1 billion to get rid of Modi in these elections. And if you subtly watch the content of the social media, you'll find a whole lot of narrative building being done. As we speak, it is on. Just analyze the content in the social media and you will see which messages on Twitter they are posted in the morning. By the evening, they have got 550,000 views. You and I post, we are lucky if we get 2,000, 3,000, and we are delighted if we cross 10,000. There are views of a particular tenor posted in the morning. By the evening, they have 550,000 views, 6 lakh, 7 lakh, 8 lakh, 10 lakh views. How? Why? You see, there is something very serious afoot, and if we don't wake up to it, we will be inviting disaster. Yes, foreign academia is setting shop here. It's very good. Please confine them to STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths. That's all that we need to be updated with. Do we have to learn about caste from Harvard? Languages, Indian cultural more than tradition, Indian history has to be manufactured in Harvard. We have outsourced our history. We have outsourced our social sciences to the West. Now they tell us who we are, what is our identity, whether you are Aryans, whether you are Dravidian. It's all imposed narratives, imposed views. And if you don't have a narrative of your own, you will soon become a part of somebody else's narrative. We are an ancient civilization. Radiocarbon dating dates Pirhana at 9,500 years from before present. You see, we are great antiquity, amazing cultural continuity. But that is now under assault, under threat by the Breaking India forces. And in Snakes in the Ganga, Rajiv Malhotra has brought us up to date, up to speed on how startups are being used to destabilize India. Not just NGOs, startups. They hire a certain set of people. They make them captive audiences in particular organization. There is a Iranian origin gentleman, very, very active in India if you read Snakes in the Ganga. And he is doing it not through NGOs. Because now we have become quite wise to NGOs. We are trying to control their funding. And I totally agree. Why should our NGOs have to be funded from United States? If they are so good, they are doing such a good job. I'm sure we have very big business houses, Reliance, Ambani's, Adani's, etc., who can fund these. Mahindras, I mean, there is no dearth of very vibrant private sector organizations who can fund these, but yet they must get funding from abroad, and then they want to agitate against the, where the thorium-based sands are, where the Kunakalam project is coming up. They want to hit our nuclear power sector, you see, and in the bargain also hit our nuclear capabilities, military. So there is a lot that is going on which is very unsavory, which is designed to break us up, which is designed to weaken us up. Yes, we are becoming a major power. From the 10th largest economy, we are today the 5th largest economy. We are heading to be the 3rd largest. That is precisely why you are you are a space power of consequence, emerging military power of major consequence. That is why you will be targeted. The clash of civilizations is very much on. It never got over. We better read Samuel Huntington again. You are an emerging civilization. You will be put down. You will be broken up, and you have so many vulnerabilities which you have given to others to exploit, to teach you about caste. Why is it that in the National Defense College, where selected brigadiers and air commodores and commodores from the Navy come to learn, the highest institute of learning in the Indian Armed Forces, why is the first lecture in the socio-economic series on caste? Why is it on caste? And why do we have to get some very well-known Indian personalities who have been educated in Harvard and other places to come and tell us about ourselves? Why do we have to go for social sciences to the West? Why? Why do we have to outsource our history to the West? These are some very seminal questions, and we better take a very hard look at our social media and how it is being used to weaken us, influence us, create narratives, supplant narratives, ram narratives down our throat, and make us a part of somebody else's narrative. This is a major, major threat that we are facing as a civilizational state. We are under constant attack. The Chinese have learnt and are doing it with great finesse. The Russians and the Chinese, they've been accused of trying to influence elections in the United States. You think your elections are not being influenced? Just take a look at the social media and you will get the shock of your lives. Take a look at what is happening on YouTube. In the garb of just analyzing your elections, what narratives are being peddled? Why has George Soros put $1 billion to attain certain electoral outcomes in India? Who the hell is he to dictate which government, which party will rule in India? What business, what right? Who gave him that God-given right to intervene here? $1 billion. That's all that it takes to buy people off here, buy journalists off here, use influencers on the social media to change narratives. It is a serious threat, ladies and gentlemen, and we must be very much alive to this threat, which could otherwise, like termites, eat us up from within. We may not face a foreign invasion from China or Pakistan or both, but without a shot fired, we may suddenly find ourselves splintering like the former Soviet Union into 15 states. Do we want that? If we don't, we'll have to wake up and smell the coffee. Thank you.